Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, Javon Harrington, back to hit you with another video. And today, we are here to continue What If Deku Was Iron Man? My Hero Academia Armored Adventures, the movie, Two Heroes. As always, if you're a fan of today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. So, as we are now covering the events of the Two Heroes movie, we are going to be seeing many changes as we enter the final stretch of our What If Deku Was Iron Man series, as we are going to be continuing into Season 3 of My Hero Academia, which will serve as the catalyst for the final arc, if you will, before we get into the events of the Multiverse of Madness. Here we'll be seeing new heroes being formed as they join the other ranks of UA's alumni. In the process, new villains will emerge from the darkness, and the three-way deadlock for power is soon to arrive. Each one a powerful force in their own right, but as to which one will prevail, that will remain to be seen. But for all this and more, stay tuned as we now continue. What If Deku Was Iron Man? My Hero Academia Armored Adventures, the movie, Two Heroes. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Izuku and Shang-Chi would look out the window as Izuku's private jet was descending upon Ai Island. It was a moving, floating city island made for those of the scientific community, for those from all around the world were gathered together for new innovations in science and other quirk-related matters. Izuku's reason for attending Ai Island was rather simple. Ever since his family had come into wealth following the death of his father, Izuku had taken it as his own responsibility to make sure that he could continue to fund his hero work, that being as Iron Man, seeing as how he didn't want to tank his family's fortunes for his own sake, and he also wanted to make sure that his mother was taken care of as well. His butler, Jarvis, who had been serving the Midoriya family ever since Izuku's father had been situated in this situation, was always kept up to date on Izuku's various adventures, as he was aware of the true purpose behind Izuku's father's death, that being that he was a guardian of one of the 10 Makuan rings, rings that were created from interstellar technology, and that, if they fell into the wrong hands, could lead to the end of the world. There were 10 rings in total, each one with a unique ability over an element or some property. Izuku's father guarded the Power Ring, an emerald stone that increased one's own natural strength. Of course, by the time Izuku had been given this ring, he had already developed the Iron Man armor. Realistically speaking, Izuku probably could have been a hero with just the ring alone. But he didn't like that idea. Izuku wanted to be a hero on his own merits. So, he created his Iron Man armor to be able to absorb power from the ring. Thus, he never had to worry about running out of power for his suits. It was more so about just making sure his suits were strong enough to contain the powers of the ring to a certain extent. In his adventures at UA, he would come into contact with another student in his class. The student's name was Shang-Chi. He was a young boy from China. He was actually the son of the warlord known as the Mandarin. His mother, being opposed to her husband's cruel ideology and their evil family history, ran away with Shang when he was young, training him in the ways of martial arts and entrusting him with the fire ring, giving him mastery over flame. While Shang was quirkless, he derived power from another source. He focused on his spiritual energies, and as such, he could use Qi to increase his physical speed, strength, and stamina to a certain degree, making him superhuman in his own right. Combined with the abilities of the Flame Ring, then he was definitely a formidable hero. But the reason for the two of them coming to Island was rather simple. Izuku was going to be attending an expo, mainly because he had various inventions that he patented. Izuku's idea was growing his own company someday, in various forms of technology and things of that nature. Something that could benefit and help the world, but also continue to fund his hero life as well. As they arrived on Island, Izuku making sure that his armored backpack was by his side, the black and gold standard armor that he had used during the final exam battle against All Might, and was actually able to withstand All Might's power to some degree. The two of them would make their way through the island as they were preparing for the expo that was coming up. As they made their way, both Izuku and Shang would check into the hotel, before deciding to walk about and see what was happening. As they did, they would be surprised when they ran into All Might. All Might didn't think that Izuku would be here, although then again, knowing the boy and his love for inventing, it made a lot of sense. Izuku would ask All Might what he was doing here, and All Might would explain that he and Momo, his new apprentice, and the one who had taken the quirk of One for All, had been given an invitation, and they had come here to visit one of All Might's good old friends. As they were speaking, a young girl would approach Izuku. She was tall and around Izuku's age, about a year or two older. She had long blonde hair and glasses. Her name was Melissa. Melissa Shields, to be precise. Izuku would then realize that this was the daughter of David Shields, someone who had worked with All Might when he had first begun his heroics in America. The two of them having a thing for the tech side of heroism would become deeply lost in conversation. So much so that Melissa would offer to show the two of them around, while All Might would go off and speak with David some more. Izuku was happy with this, although he first would try to call and find Momo, hoping that he could run into her while they were there. The three would make their way about the island, and slowly but surely Izuku would run into his fellow classmates. Among them, Momo Yaoyorozu, who wasn't all too keen of Izuku spending so much time with Melissa. She wasn't jealous or anything, but it was just she seemed to get a little too close for her comfort. Uraraka and Jiro were also there, and Uraraka was happy to see Shang, as the two of them did do sparring from time to time, ever since Uraraka's workplace studies with Gunhead, the hero. She had been working more on her martial arts, and Shang was a good source of help for her in that regard. There were also other students from Class 1A that were also on the island as well, among them being Katsuki Bakugo and Shoto Todoroki, as well as Kirishima. They had also run into Dinky Kaminari as well as Tenya Ida, who were also on the island as well. But the biggest surprise was when they would run into T'Challa, who was also on the visit. Well, not so much that he was on a visit, but more so that he had come to bring his sister along, who was also a fan of the technical side of things. And with that, they would finally get to meet T'Challa's younger sister. Her name was Shuri. Shuri would be excited to meet Izuku. She had watched the sports festival from Wakanda, and when she had seen Izuku's armor and what it was capable of doing, she just knew she had to meet with him. She compared how Izuku made his armor to what she had made for her brother. Izuku was surprised to learn that she was the one responsible for the suit that T'Challa used, noting that it had its own capabilities, such as being able to absorb kinetic energy and then release it in shockwaves. She also explained some of the foundation of it and how they used a special metal called vibranium. Of course, she couldn't reveal too much, as there were some secrets that Wakanda couldn't have shared out to the world. But Izuku did become a lot more interested in that metal. Of course, he had no idea how he would get his hands on it, and he wasn't going to do something like trying to buy it illegally or anything, since that would be rude and completely disrespectful. But still, if he could get his hands on some of that vibranium, combining it with his own armors, then that could potentially be a game changer. Once the group had all gotten together, Melissa would tell them of the upcoming banquet later on that night, and as such, she would say that they were all invited. Everyone would go to do their own things and get ready for the formal party. However, before leaving, Melissa would reveal to Izuku something that she actually had on her mind. First and foremost, she would tell Izuku that she was in fact quirkless, like him. But when she saw how he competed at the sports festival, seeing someone that was quirkless still being able to be a hero, well, it inspired her. So much so that she too had her own aspirations to be a hero. She would take Izuku to her lab, and there she showed him something that she had been working on. It was a suit that was still in testing. It was something that she had designed since she had always found this type of power fascinating. It was the ability to grow and shrink. She had made something that she called PEM particles. With these, she could grow or shrink on a dime, although shrinking was preferable for her. She usually shrank down to the size of an ant or a wasp, to be specific, although she wasn't sure about which animal she wanted to be a motif for. Izuku suggested that she should be more akin to a wasp, although she had been floating with the idea of being able to shrink down and talk to ants. Izuku suggested that she could always do both if she wanted to, but the shrinking technology was revolutionary. She thought so also, but she was still worried about her dad, as the two of them were all that they had in this life, and she didn't want him to worry about her in being a hero or anything. However, Izuku would encourage her, telling her that if being a hero was something that she really wanted to do, then she should definitely give it a try. And this would pique her interest. As Izuku would leave, she would thank him once again, and she hoped that they could talk to one another soon. Izuku would tell her sure, as he left to go back to the hotel to get on his tux, as the time for the formal party was going to be rather soon. Meanwhile, Wolfram, a terrorist villain, had secretly arrived on the island, ready to take control when the time was right. As the young heroes were waiting to go inside, All Might, along with his friend David, had already been inside waiting. As they had done so, they had been wrapping up a recent conversation they had been having, one about All Might and his situation. David had gotten a chance to meet Momo Yaoyorozu, the girl who inherited All Might's quirk. He had seen some tape of what she could do, and he had to admit, she was pretty extraordinary. If anyone was a good successor, it would be her. But still, All Might's situation wasn't improving. Of course, he wanted to do something, but his research, everything that he had worked towards, it had been restrained by the committee because they deemed it was too dangerous. But all the same, he felt as though if he didn't do something soon, then the world would lose its symbol of peace. As the party got underway, from out of nowhere, villains would attack, restraining all of the heroes, even All Might, and keeping them in place. As the villain, Wolfram, would reveal that the entire island was now being taken hostage. This was a heist, and they were looking to steal some prized technology from the island. However, Wolfram was not alone in this endeavor, as he had some other villains giving him some outside help. Two of them in particular were well known throughout the world, one glowing an ominous green. His name was the Radioactive Man, and the other was a criminal from the United States. He fought with an electric whip that was seemingly able to cut through anything. His name was Whiplash. The three villains made their way through as they went to grab David's shields, taking him along so that he could help break into the island's security vault and steal what they had been looking for. Midoriya and the rest of Class 1A would see what was going on, although thankfully the villains didn't know that they were there yet. All the same, the group had decided that they were going to try to take back the island, saving the hostages and keeping them from being harmed by the villains. Even though All Might had tried to tell them to stay out of it, he knew, just by that look in Izuku's eyes, that he wasn't going to do so. Melissa would warn that they had to be able to move without being detected by the security system, and as such, they would try to take their way through the ventilation system. However, even then, they would still end up being detected by Wolfram. Once he saw what was happening, he would deploy his forces to go after them immediately. Shuri would stay to the back of the group once they were able to connect to the grid of the island. Thankfully, she always carried a tiny laptop on her. She felt as though she could hack the systems and get everything back in order. As such, a few of the students would stay back and guard Shuri, while the others went along ahead. Melissa would reveal that she had actually brought her hero suit along. She always carried a prototype on her, although she wasn't sure how useful it would be. She would suit up for battle, and Izuku would do the same, donning a spare armor that he kept on him at all times. The black and gold armor would don over Izuku immediately, and together, he, Melissa, Uraraka, Momo, Todoroki, Kirishima, Bakugo, and T'Challa would make their way to the floors, fighting the various villains as they made their way to the top. However, before they could get too far, a blast of radiated energy would come flying towards them. Izuku would jump in between the two. Using his repulsor rays, he would blast it back, as they looked through and saw that the Radioactive Man had appeared. Izuku could sense that his radiation power was rather strong, and that he wasn't going to be an easy person to defeat. However, Bakugo and Todoroki would step forward next. They told the others that they needed to move forward, and that they could hold things down. Izuku warned them not to underestimate him and to be careful. The heroes would move on ahead, as Todoroki and Bakugo faced off against the Radioactive Man. He would blast out beams of radiation towards the two boys. Bakugo would counter with his explosions, while Todoroki countered with his fire. Thankfully, Todoroki's ice proved to be the benefactor in the battle, being the power that could offset the heat of the radiation. But it wasn't just Todoroki's ice quirk that would prove to be the benefactor in this battle. It was also the fact that Todoroki was in possession of the Ice Ring, one of the 10 Makuon rings that granted him the ability over ice. Under normal circumstances, his ice quirk would usually be too much for him to handle, seeing as how if he overused it, it could cause him to suffer from frostbite. However, by using the power of the ring, he was able to negate this problem. As such, he was able to summon ice at an extremely large degree, more so than even the radioactive man could handle. Although still, he wouldn't be taken down so easily. This was where Bakugo came in, as he engaged in close quarters combat. As the two of them battled, Bakugo's heat from his explosions only grew stronger and stronger, mainly due to the fact that the radiation given off from his body caused Bakugo to sweat even further, causing the nitroglycerin to increase its potency. This was also in Bakugo's favor as well. Under normal circumstances, being too close to this much radiation could be detrimental to a normal human, or even someone with a quirk. However, the way Bakugo's body was made, from the nitroglycerin that he had gained from his mother, and from the acidity that he gained from his father, it gave him a bit of a natural resistance, at least to the degree that the radiation waves didn't actually affect him too negatively, but rather, it kind of increased his power. The combination of both Todoroki and Bakugo proved to be just enough to bring the radioactive man down. After getting some time to recover, they would make their way and follow with the others. The other group of heroes would continue to make their way to the top of the building. As they did so, they would come into contact with the next villain, that being Whiplash. He wasn't just skilled with the whip, but he was pretty proficient in hand-to-hand combat, and as such, Shang-Chi decided to take him on, along with T'Challa, who also wanted to back him up. The other heroes would continue to move on, one by one, until eventually Melissa, Momo, and Izuku would be the last three that would make their way to the top. Uraraka staying behind to use her gravity quirk to help defeat some of the security robots that had stopped them and gotten in their way. As they did so, the three would eventually make their way to the top, but once they did, they would discover the unfortunate truth. That being that David had actually been the one responsible for the attack. You see, David wanted to steal back a certain piece of technology. He had created a headset that could maximize the power of someone's quirk. He believed that with this, he could give it to All Might, and All Might could continue being a hero despite his current limitations. However, the problem was that the committee that funded this research had it confiscated and sealed away because they believed that this sort of technology was simply too dangerous. David believed that he had hired fake villains to cause the distraction in order to retrieve the device. However, Wolfram would reveal that they were in fact real villains, and that this was not a game. One of David's assistants, Samuel, would be killed in the process, and David would be forced to open the vault, and he would be forced to give over the technology. Because you see, Wolfram, he had been hired by a certain someone. Because what David also failed to reveal was that the key part of his technology, what powered it and what made it so prevalent, was the stone within the middle of the headset. That stone was the Life Stone, one of the 10 stones in each of the Makuon rings. When David had created it, David was one of the ring's guardians. David thought that it would be best to keep the ring safe by incorporating it in technology and giving it to a powerful hero. He thought that maybe All Might would be a good person to watch over it, seeing as how the power was going to be meant to amplify him. The Ring of Life was able to virtually have power over it. As such, that life energy was used to convert and amplify one's own power. What David couldn't have anticipated, though, was that more users of the Makuon rings would actually have been on the island at the same time, as even Wolfram would be shocked by this, coming to learn that Izuku had a ring as well, along with Todoroki, Shang-Chi, and even T'Challa. Learning that now there were 5 rings on the island all at the same time, this only made Wolfram more and more ambitious, as he now realized that this was a golden opportunity. Half of the Makuon rings all on the island? If he stole them all, then he could make an even bigger profit. As such, the plans had now changed. It was no longer about just stealing this piece of technology and getting away. He wanted all of it. He would focus his attentions on Midoriya, as he would use his quirk to try to attack him with various forms of metal. However, Midoriya had countered for this, and he shot using his repulsor rays to blast at the debris coming towards him. However, Wolfram would only continue to show his mastery over metal, as Izuku would find it hard for him to move, his body feeling as though it were seemingly being controlled as Wolfram forced him to the ground. Momo would attempt to fight against the villain, as she channeled One for All. Using around 10%, she used the overdrive, causing the power to flow all around her. She would create robotic metallic hands using her creation quirk and go attacking at the villain, only for her to be blown back as well, as he was the counter for metal ultimately. Thankfully, around that time, the security had been dropped and All Might was now freed. He would go racing towards the villains at once, making his way. Once he had arrived, he would confront Wolfram, who would use his power to also try to restrain and hold All Might, seeing this as a bonus, as having a chance to defeat the #1 hero, though that was also a golden opportunity. And now, it seemed as though everything was all at his disposal. Wolfram would put on the headset, amplifying his quirk to the maximum, as he now had control over much of the metal around him. Using the magnetic quirk, he would start to create large, metallical cubes that would come crashing down upon the group of heroes. The others who had finished their fights would have arrived in time, and they helped in fighting off against Wolfram and his powerful forces as much as they could. Todoroki using his remaining strength, creating large walls of ice to shield the others. Bakugo firing off his large explosions. T'Challa moving with a quickness, absorbing much of the hits that he had taken before dishing out a strong electrical charge, as well as the other heroes fighting off in every which corner of the island that had now seemingly turned into a battlefield. All Might led the way. However, in the process, David would find himself trapped, as Wolfram, using the quirk amplification device, looked to crush them all in one fell swoop. However, before he could do so, multiple discs would come charging at the large constructs that he had made, causing them to shrink instantly. Everyone looked and saw that it was Melissa. She was wearing her suit. Granted, it was still in testing, and she had practically used half of her supply of PIM particles just to be able to stop his first attack. But still, it was enough for them to be able to catch their breaths. She looked to All Might, who had been like a godfather to her, someone that she had known all her life and idolized. She looked at everyone and told them that now wasn't the time to give up, that if they were going to win, it had to be here and now. All Might would be reinvigorated by this, as everyone stood together, as they went charging towards Wolfram all together at once. Wolfram drew on the power of the Makuon ring embedded in the quirk amplification, as he continued his assault on the heroes. Shang-Chi and Todoroki, each using their respective rings. Shang with the flame ring, Todoroki with the ice ring, creating large walls of fire and ice that would block most of Wolfram's attacks, allowing for the others to move forward. Melissa would hang onto Izuku's back, as even while his suit was damaged, with the strength of the power ring, he was able to move on and move forward. Melissa would use more of her shrinking disc, shrinking the debris around her father, allowing for him to be freed long enough for T'Challa to move amongst the falling rocks and other collapsing metals, grabbing him just in time and getting him out of the way. Once they had done so, Momo and All Might would continue to charge, moving towards Wolfram. The two of them running and moving in tandem, as they both drew upon the power of One for All respectively. However, Wolfram using the power of the Makuon ring that had been bestowed upon him, he had looked to overwhelm the two of them and crush them once and for all. Once Melissa had gotten her father to safety, Izuku would go charging in, rocketing as fast as he could, his suit drawing upon the powers of the power ring. Both All Might and Momo would launch a simultaneous Detroit Smash, using their power to collide against Wolfram, until finally Izuku would come flying in to give them the edge that they needed, channeling all of his strength into the main repulsor ray in his chest. Drawing on as much power from the power ring as he could, he would launch the green Unibeam, amplifying the power of the double Detroit Smash as it went crashing into Wolfram, destroying his entire robotic body in the process and defeating him once and for all. In the midst of the large explosion, everyone would be sent flying in different directions, although eventually they would appear from the rubble. Izuku had moved just in the nick of time to shield Melissa and her father using his armored body. Thankfully, everyone was alright for the most part, although there were definitely a lot of injured to say the least. Amongst the destruction and debris, Wolfram would be found still alive, along with the destroyed device. David would be shocked to learn that Izuku was also in the know of the Makuon rings. However, once he had learned that his father had also been a guardian, it all made sense now. Of course, there was debate about what to do with the ring, and where they should keep it. David looked to his daughter, looking at what she was able to do, and how she had been able to create her own path becoming a hero. He looked to All Might and he asked if he could train her, and if Izuku would be able to help her as well. He believed if they did so, she could become an exceptional hero in her own right. All Might vowed that he would watch over Melissa, and that he would watch over all of the children, knowing that protecting them was an important job and the role of a teacher. David would give Melissa the life ring as she held it close, entrusting in her to be the new guardian of it, and allowing her to go back to UA with the others to become a hero. Melissa asked her father if he was sure about this, and he assured her that this was what she was meant to do. Melissa looked back to Midoriya with a smile, happy that she was going to begin her new journey in life as a hero. Everyone celebrating a job well done, as the day had been saved. However, all was not entirely well. For you see, unknown to the others, there had been someone spying in the distance. It was a girl who had gone by many names in her lifetime. But she had now decided on one that worked best with her abilities. Her name was Ghost. She would send a call that would go all the way back to China. There, the Mandarin looked over his armor that had been built, now entering into its final completion. The black armor, and within its 2 gauntlets, there were 10 slots, each one for a stone. Within the gauntlet, there was already 1 stone in his possession, that being the black ring, the Makuan Ring of Darkness. He was satisfied with what he had so far, but now it was time to collect. As he listened to the call from his informant, Ghost, he would learn of the whereabouts of at least 5 of the Makuan rings already, learning of where they would all be located and of who had them. He smiled as he thanked her for her services before hanging up. As he looked out into the night sky, soon the will of the Mandarin would be fulfilled, and he would claim the powers of God. It looked like it was time to pay his son and his friends a visit. A nice meeting between father and son. This concludes What If Deku Was Iron Man? My Hero Academia Armored Adventures, the movie, 2 Heroes. As always, if you're a fan of today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting that is to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we continue. What if Bel Crenel was Thor? Don Machi, The Last King, Season 2, Part 1. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.